because the previous day, the Premier made a very clear statement that sovereignty right is more important than individual right. Sovereignty right is the country's right. You know, China uses that time and time again. So you're not going to interfere with us because this is our internal affairs. You're going to interfere with our sovereignty. And the first question, so I was put in a pretty difficult situation. I answered no. I would consider human rights, even individual rights, more important than sovereignty rights. And I waited for some really sharp criticism. The person who posed the question stood up and said, "I agree with you," and he sat down, and the question was not raised. And I was surprised. I think there's something that, if not Kantian, there's something very basic to the idea of the dignity of a person. Human rights do, in the first generation, human rights do protect the individualism or the individual dignity of a person. If you allow a country or a group to formulate ideas of human rights that will sovereignty rights, that will undermine human rights, the violation is unstoppable. Just like, almost like the free market. I don't agree with the strong form of free market, but I do agree the free market is more functional, more efficient than planned economy. So that is very widely accepted. However, the question is no longer that easy. If you look at the question about treaty minorities, I think the American record is extremely regrettable. It's perhaps one of the worst, meaning indigenous people. Over I don't know how long a period of time, the indigenous people really wiped out. And Canada decided to change its policy, so Canada now has a very civilized, conciliatory policy towards native Canadians. But that leads to all kinds of problems as well. Australia, New Zealand, all developed a very comprehensive program to protect even some of the countries in the Pacific Islands. But in America, it's extremely difficult to deal with. You know the rather sad story in Hawaii. And overwhelming majority of Hawaiians are now Christian. But there are also indigenous sedimentations of Hawaiian spirituality. And they are not happy with their situation. I still use the idea of identity, Confucian, and so forth. So historically, the native Hawaiians, they're so small now, and even if you calculate 1/16th right now, 1/16th of your Hawaiian ancestry, you could consider as a full Hawaiian, 1/16th. And even with that, you're only talking about 200 to 300,000, very small. So the idea is when you came, meaning the missionaries, when you first came to us, we have all the land, you only have the Bible. So right now, we have the Bible, and you have all the land. And so how to deal with that kind of question? That is the whole question about. So there are quite a few very militant human rights advocates among minority groups. And of course, cultural diversity leads to pluralism. So you should allow different societies to exercise their human rights according to the cultural customs, provided that these cultural customs can violate the very basic human rights of not only survival, the idea of no torch, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and so forth. Is it possible to imagine a different approach to human rights? You get the functional equivalent of human right. which are very positive, but you do not rely upon simply individualism. Individualism is not necessarily an essential aspect of the practice of human rights. Many people just don't believe it. The liberal argument is that without individualism, sometimes even without property, without personal choice, and there's no human rights. But this argument is based upon the idea of the responsibility of the political elite or intellectual elite. Human rights function even more comprehensively, more persuasively, if the elite is will have to observe some sense of responsibility. The more powerful, the more influential, the more you have access to information and ideas, the more you are obligated for the well-being of the people. And that can be, I don't know how you develop a legal system to protect it. But that idea is predicated on the people's right to make claims. The ability to make claims